it's going to be controlled remotely. So somebody at NB Power is going to have to send an email, I think was what it said. And then they'll get an email, and within the half an hour, they'll be able to turn it on with some big red button down in Missouri. And so that's how it gets turned on.
Why
Which
should
I
the
know is
button
completely
for
insane.
Canadian Power be in the United States?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Boggles the mind.
Doesn't really make you like feel like I totally trust that this is going to come on when we have a when we have a blackout in some really cold period. It also, because like I mentioned, during that 2023 snap, if you look at the minute by minute play of what they tried to turn on, all of the oil and gas technologies, if we can still call them that. I feel like technology is like a word for like something that's polished and futuristic, and this is really old technology. So these like dated dinosaur machines that are soon to be stranded assets, with which we should not get new ones, none of them worked in that cold snap. So crazy to be like, let's put another one. The PEI project just got put on hold because they heard batteries were cheaper, and now there's an REOI out for batteries. And they're like, well, what if it's going to be billions of dollars cheaper? Then we should probably like check it and see what the options are. And then if it's not a better option, then we'll pick it back up after. So that's great. Good job, PEI. They are the role model currently. And so when you are up against such a giant beast of a utility and a provincial government and large oil and gas industry, you're looking right for all the tools that you can draw on to be able to get your word out, get the truth out, get the good math, good science, and good governance kind of ideas across. And so Ecofactors was born out of that. Give a voice to the opposition to this development.
Welcome to another edition of the Environment in Canada podcast, a podcast about the environment in Canada by Sierra Club Canada. I'm your host, Connor Curtis, Director of Communications at Sierra Club Canada, and today I'm talking with Lisa Griffin of the Atlantic Wildlife Institute and the Ecofactors podcast about a proposed new diesel/gas plant in Tantramar, New Brunswick, and why battery options would be a better fit, and why we're seeing other places like PEI explore batteries instead. But before we begin, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe to get the latest episodes from us. So Lisa, thank you for joining me today. For those tuning in, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Connor. It's an honor and a privilege to share this space with you. My name is Lisa Griffin, and I guess a consultant. It's a vague term, but I'm currently also the coordinator of the Protect the Chignecto Isthmus Coalition, which was founded in September 2025 to safeguard the people, wildlife, and natural resources of the vital region of the Chignecto Isthmus. And that's the piece of land that connects the mainland Canada to beautiful Nova Scotia. So the whole province would be an island without this little piece of land.
Right.
And may someday be an island, but we can get into that. It's one of the most vulnerable places, one of the two most vulnerable places in North America for sea level rise, like man-made climate change caused sea level rise. And there's a train track that goes across that carries millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of goods that fuels the economy here on the Atlantic coast. And it's in great danger right now. So the federal government matched some funding from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to rebuild the dike system, in fact, that holds the land in place and reconstitutes it all so it's stronger and better. And that was just briefly before this whole thing started where we felt we needed to protect the region. But yeah,
Right.
and my background's in environmental sustainability and international development. And I've worked in the nonprofit a long time, nonprofit field a long time, and I work with Atlantic Wildlife Institute currently as the resources and development coordinator.
And on that note, I understand you have a podcast, and it's funny we were talking about climate change impacts. I think a lot of people, when they hear about climate change, they don't quite get sometimes just how, dangerous it is to a number of different things. But I know that through your work, you're doing a podcast now called Ecofactors. What led to the creation of Ecofactors? Why did you feel it was necessary to have a podcast?
Yeah, so Ecofactors is one of the tools for protecting the Chignecto Isthmus against a recent um, development proposal by our power utility to put a 500 megawatt diesel and gas turbine powered power station right on the isthmus. So in like a greenfield area, which is not an industrial zone, rather than putting it in a already industrialized place. That in itself is kind of like a silly idea, right? We have these zoned industrial areas where we're already allowed to build there. So it's kind of like, hey, kid, here's where all your toys are. You should play in here. And then they go and draw like on the kitchen walls with a crayon. Um, so it doesn't make any sense for that reason. But there's a slew of other reasons on why it doesn't make sense. It's a contract with an American company, so we'd essentially be giving up our sovereignty, our energy sovereignty, and we would have to import the gas from a very deteriorating border situation from those down in south of the border. When obviously, as everybody knows, there's a war on oil right now, so it's getting pricier as the days go on, and that is a volatile kind of situation in comparison to say batteries as an alternative kind of thing. There's
Mhm.
the coalition. So the Protect the Chignecto Isthmus Coalition is made up of over 20, currently at 20, but always growing, NGOs and community organizations, and then just people, concerned citizens who are across New Brunswick, but also now Nova Scotia. And PEI has joined as well because they're kind of fighting similar fights in Pictou and PEI, although the PEI project just got put on hold because they heard batteries were cheaper, and now there's an REOI out for batteries.
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
like, well, what if it's going to be billions of dollars cheaper? Then we should probably like check it and see what the options are. And then if it's not a better option, then we'll pick it back up after. So that's great. Good job, PEI.
Yeah.
They are the role model currently. And so when you are up against such a giant beast of a utility and a provincial government and large oil and gas industry, you're looking right for all the tools that you can draw on to be able to get your word out, get the truth out, get the good math, good science, and good governance kind of ideas across. And so Ecofactors was born out of that, give a voice to the opposition to this development. And then after we win this, we'll use the platform to protect the Chignecto Isthmus and like maybe strengthen our partnerships with the Indigenous communities
Mhm.
and use it for education for youth about the insanely beautiful biodiversity that exists on the isthmus and the migration of moose, and interviewing anybody from across anywhere about the kind of where development of humans intersects with the natural world, and how
Mhm.
sometimes that can work if it's well designed, but oftentimes it doesn't, and what that looks like. And that's the work of the Atlantic Wildlife Institute. And so this is actually a podcast that they've been looking at popping up for a really long time. And then, so I guess Riggs kind of helped to push it into the actual like publication, or yeah,
That's
air.
that.
So
Well,
yeah.
and it's funny because obviously, like the Environment in Canada podcast, we've been running it for now for a bit over a year. I know we're at, as of the time of recording this, episode 104, I think just came out,
Ooh,
right? So
congratulations.
yeah, hey, thank you very much. And it's fun, honestly, to do. Well, I mean, depending upon the subject matter, right? Sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's depressing. But it is one of those things where, and probably for the most part, we deal with a lot of energy issues and climate issues and that side of things. But if we want to talk about nature tomorrow, or we want to talk about biodiversity, it's there. It's a concern I have with a lot of comms materials that we create that, there's always reuse. There's always a way of building, you build this comms infrastructure. It's so good to hear that you have a plan to like use this afterwards to talk about other issues because yeah, otherwise it's a shame to build up a podcast and then have this following and then not see it get used any further.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do think it's kind of building its listenership. And not only that, like through these things, I mean, as you say, like this kind of building of a community around a certain topic, we're also building a real community around this topic. So the community is getting stronger in many ways. And it's nice to have the podcast because it can reach an even wider community. Like I had Jason Ryu from NR Store, the battery energy storage systems company in Ontario, the Oneida project, which is like 1,000 megawatts or more of a functional battery storage system example. This is the company also who is proposing an alternative to rigs, who would be able to put the exact same capacity in place of the rigs project, which would mean that it would probably work better in the cold because all of the oil and gas options didn't work in that cold snap in 2023 that they refer to, because they're like in these like buildings that are the temperature is controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool. They're super futuristic. If you go on the NR Store website, I'm like, let's get that. And then as it's running or when it needs to run, it doesn't actually require any emissions. They can be charged through emitters, or they can be charged through renewables. It can be charged any which way, right? It could be solar or wind, or it could be the already existing gas turbines that we have that are basically stranded assets and not being used. So it could actually give a use to the stranded assets that we have. And then and be $2.5 billion cheaper. Anyway, this super cool guy from the batteries, I'm able to interview him and then get the word across about, educating people on the actual facts rather than
Yeah.
misinformation about batteries. So it's a really cool tool for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you bring up that, but like I think there's this thing with renewables batteries, right? I hear this argument, I see it online, but well, oh, you're going to need fossil fuels in order to get them to work. And it's like, well, yeah, when they were building the first cars, they used horse-drawn carriages to bring the materials to the factories to build the cars. But then once the
Mm-hmm.
cars were there, you could use a car to do that. The same way as with renewables and batteries, right? Like, yeah, there's going to be some degree of oil and gas energy utilization to get the renewables up and running. But increasingly, as you build them, you're able to build the new ones with the renewable power. You're able to,
Mm-hmm.
your batteries. The more
Mm-hmm.
wind you install, the more your battery is going to be able, which is already more efficient. See this with electrical vehicles too. And we're big proponents of public transport and reducing vehicle use overall. But again, even when you have an electric vehicle that is powered by, fossil fuel electricity source, it's still more efficient. And if you make that wind and you make that solar, suddenly that's way more efficient, way better for the environment than it was before. So there does seem to be there's a very calculated misinformation campaign that seems to want to hold back these solutions from being implemented in any way, shape, or form. And because the reality is, they are mutually reinforcing. Once you start bringing in wind power, you've got battery storage. Battery storage helps you install more wind and solar, vice versa. They become the sort of, it feels, yeah, mutually reinforcing green effect, right? Especially given that the prices are increasingly dropping and outcompeting gas projects for generating
Mm-hmm.
power.
Yeah, batteries have dropped in half in price since 2023. So that's amazing. And unfortunately, it seems like the utility doesn't really want to look at numbers past 2023 for whatever reason. Maybe it's just like a matter of not wanting to do the math again, because all you need to do is half it, right? So actually just divide it by two. And
Yeah.
that's some pretty simple math. I love that you bring up the misinformation campaigns. And I think that's another reason why podcasts are super important. Because I don't know, what we get in media is very it's kind of like there's only one chance to get the word out, and then they have to do it in a really big hurry, our mainstream
Yeah.
media. And then they're like, oh darn, that wasn't really what I wanted to say. Like, but okay, but now everybody read that, or everybody watched that 5 o'clock news piece or whatever it is. And now they think that. And if they keep thinking that thing over and over, and then there's the what is it? The like when you hear something over and over, you just believe it, the bias.
Yeah,
Cognitive.
well, it's a common PR tactic, right? That you try to repeat something over and over again. People will,
Like pop music.
believe it, right? Because they think, well, I've heard it so many times, but it has a backfire effect too, right? Like I think the oil
Mm.
and gas monotony that everybody's heard about, like, oh, LNG is good, gas is good, oil is good over and over and over again. People are starting to realize like that's a line. And we see this every single time, every energy crisis that happens, what's pitched, more gas projects, more oil projects. And I mean, even when when it didn't work out the first time, it didn't work out the second time, it didn't work out the third time because there was no business case, renewables cheaper, electricity cheaper, countries making that transition. Even though it doesn't work all those times, it's the same line that we hear. It feels like every time that this is the case. And you touched a little bit on the sovereignty aspect of this. I mean, again, we're talking about a gas plant built by an American company. So I don't really get where the logic of that is in terms of, yeah, like making our energy more independent.
Yeah, and it sucks, because there's not any, like, there's no job creation. Like right now, the local company is hired in Sackville or whatever I think it's a Sackville company, to come and bring all the shale to fill in the wetlands, right? It's a lot. They need to fill in the wetlands because they're wetlands. So they're literally, the ground is wet for a really far distance. And so they keep bringing in more shale and bringing in more shale and kind of wrecking the roads and whatever. It sucks for the local people. But um, after that, it's going to be controlled remotely. So somebody at NB Power is going to have to send an email, I think was what it said. And then they'll get an email, and within the half an hour, they'll be able to turn it on with some big red button down in Missouri. Um, and so that's how it gets turned on,
Why
which
should
I
the
know is
button
completely
for
insane.
Canadian Power be in the United States?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, boggles the mind.
Doesn't really make you like feel like I totally trust that this is going to come on when we have a when we have a blackout in some really cold period. It also, because like I mentioned, during that 2023 snap, if you look at the minute by minute play of what they tried to turn on, all of the oil and gas technologies, if we can still call them that. I feel like technology is like a word for like something that's polished and futuristic, and this is really old technology. So these like dated dinosaur machines that are soon to be stranded assets, with which we should not get new ones, none of them worked in that cold snap. So crazy to be like, let's put another one, Jones.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, I don't, and then also when you have these like other examples that are actually working, like the Oneida project in Ontario, and it's showing that it's working, and then people are like, oh my God, but batteries are gonna light on fire, they're so volatile. I'm like, no, they now have better technology for things like that, and they're all air controlled, quality controlled, fire controlled. They have little like monitors on them to show if they get too hot, etc. I don't know if you would prefer to have a battery sitting next to your house, or like 3,000 liters of diesel that is got nobody watching it, and there's not enough firefighters, even if you did have some fire hydrants in the area. So I don't know what the time frame is to get them out there, but within our kind of like droughts that we're having in the summer and in the wildfire increase, I definitely don't want a big tanker of diesel next to my house. And so there's just so many problems with it.
yeah,
Um, like I don't want to be that person who's ranting, but actually like the solution, I think, is the correct information, to know that projects like these are bad science, bad math, and bad governance, and that the solution is the opposite of those, and that there are like thousands of people across the province right now fighting for the planet and fighting for kids' futures and fighting for the elderly who live in the area who might have COPD or asthma, and are vulnerable to the carbon emissions and the methane emissions that are going to be coming off of this plant. I mean, not coming off of the plant doesn't exist and it never will, but if it was to be built, that would happen. And they might, God forbid, die earlier. And then the people who don't have COPD or asthma or existing lung conditions might get it, and I don't
yeah.
want that. And I think somebody was telling me the other day that it's just going to like basically like the wind goes straight towards PEI. Like they should be concerned about can they stop ours too? Because they stopped theirs. They didn't halt the project, but they paused it. So I'm like, hey guys, can you come over
Yeah.
here and help us? Yeah. We do need all the help we can get. And I just kind of getting the truth across to our politicians. And I think the exciting thing right now is that the politicians that are in the seat right now have this really huge opportunity to make a big difference and say, I did that. My vote made that stop. And we now have batteries and we have reduced our emissions by whatever percentage it is. We will reach our net zero 2035 goals because of those politicians who are in there right now who make the right choice.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
and this is the other thing so how is the resistance going? I mean, because every time I check in, obviously we have some folks at Sierra Club Canada who live locally who are involved with this kind of stuff. And, every time I check in with them, it seems like there's more and more people against the gas plant, more and more people, coming around, more and more people saying, let's go renewable or do storage and do renewable energy storage, instead. And so I don't think I think a lot of folks at the federal government level, from what I've seen, kind of underestimated that there would be resistance. New Brunswick also has a history of resistance to fracking, a history of resistance to gas. In Nova Scotia, a lot of people are angry about fracking. So the whole region seems to have actually quite a strong resistance to this stuff. How have things been going and what is it like talking to people about this?
It's going really well, actually, and it's fine talking to people. Like I've been involved in the sustainability thing for a long time. Like my background is in sustainability. I drove a smart car in Australia as an energy auditor. So I've heard every possible thing about, jokes about smart
Right.
cars or even small cars or even like energy efficiency in general. And then I successfully banned the plastic bag. I changed the policy at the local government level to ban the free distribution of plastic bags in Fremantle, Western Australia when I lived there and did my master's there. So I've heard like every excuse across the board on like why we need plastic bags. That was actually a really hard campaign for that reason because the communications piece was hard. We were like the big greeny hippies and then we were, up against like just everyday people who just wanted us to go away. And anyway, I won that anyways. But this isn't the case for this. This is actually like 99% of the people we speak to on a daily basis, all day long, are in total agreement with us that this is unnecessary. And they have their own personal reasons, like whatever their personal reasons might be. And I think even where there are differences, you can kind of talk to people like, what do you want your future to look like? Like gas plant aside, what would you like your future to look like? And do you have any grandchildren? What do you think the planet will be like for them? And do you have any worries? What about rate costs? Or do you think the power bills are too high? Because this one is $2.5 billion more than the battery option. Um,
Well, I was going to say it's more expensive energy at the end of the day too for people, right? Like that's what we're
yeah,
also talking about. It's funny how increasingly, and I think this has always been the case at an individual level to a certain extent. When I think about like the green things that I do in my personal life, most people I know do in their personal life, a big part of that is they're also just cheaper, right? Like it's
yeah.
also cheaper not to be wasteful. And another, aspect of this seems to be that yeah, not only is it better for the climate not to go over to the gas plant, but also it's better on the wallets of people. It's a cheaper energy project to go with renewables, so and storage, right? Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
I mean, totally. Like I always tell people that like you don't have to believe in sustainability or believe that we're going to save the planet or the polar bears or whatever. But the things that you do to live sustainably make you actually a happier person and you have a life with less suffering. Like if you grow your own food and you're like less likely to get sick and you'd be healthier and you have this rewarding feeling of like whatever happens with serotonin when you stick your hands in the dirt. And if you bike to work, you become healthier, your body is healthier, you slow down, you get to see your community more and like wave to people at the bus stop. You actually get more sunshine, so you get more vitamin D. Like there's all the things that you do that are sustainable, probably the things that also make you happy. You can just enjoy your life, and then that life will probably tie up with something that is in balance with the planet and Mother Earth. Speaking of the water keepers and the people who care the most about the planet, the Indigenous community just came out and spoke against the plant. So when you're asking how the opposition is going, personally, I think that was a big kind of missing piece for us. And I actually feel really strongly emotionally about that. When I think about it, I'm like, thank you. And it just seems so simple for them. Like their comments to the media was like, 330 doctors just signed from the Shea Dumont Hospital. They wrote a letter to the Premier Susan Holt and said, can you please not go ahead with this project because it's going to clog our health system? And we know exactly what that's going to look like here. We don't have the capacity to deal with it. And here's the signatures of 330 doctors. And so the Indigenous water keepers, they said like, so the president, to the Canadian president of the Canadian PROENERGY, they asked him to come in and present. And so he presented, but I don't think he got much time to talk. And they wanted to have him in the room to speak together. And they said, do you think that the doctors are wrong? Like, do you think that all these super smart doctors are incorrect, So like just really simple questions like that. And they're like, well, if we don't need it, why would we put it there?
Yeah.
And what happens to the water, So like at one point when NB Power was presenting, it was like a couple months back at Mount Allison University, the room was full of very concerned citizens, residents, neighbors of the proposed site, and some Indigenous peoples. And they were asking really, really good questions. And one of the Indigenous women stood up and she said, like, are you on the earth or are you of the earth? And he couldn't answer the question. Like Brad Cody of NB Power couldn't answer the question. And another woman stood up who's a neighbor to the right, directly neighboring the property. And she's like, what's going to happen when my well runs dry because of all the millions of liters of water you're using every day? And they said, well, we probably could just replace it with bottled water for you.
Which is, like, and this is one of these things because we constantly deal with this framing of, oh, these gas projects, oil and gas pragmatic. It's the smart choice. But then you ask any simple question, right? Like very pragmatic question, right? Like what happens to the water? What about energy costs? Okay, so you got a button that controls all this that's in the United States. Like very simple, very pragmatic questions, right? Not, and they cannot answer them, or they
That's
haven't
right.
thought about it, or they haven't. And it's like, yeah, well, okay, your version of pragmatism and practicality is the most unpragmatic, most unpractical thing, if you cannot answer those, as you say, very simple, very basic questions. And I think too, you talk about the being of the earth question, right? Like that, we think about that maybe as, oh, that's a deeper philosophical question, but it's not. It's actually a very pragmatic question we need to be asking ourselves right now, right? Like the planet is in an ecosystem crisis. It is being made worse by these things. Putting that off and waiting for another day because it's maybe a more difficult conversation to have isn't smart. It doesn't get us to a better outcome later on, right? Like we know the more we put off that those sorts of questions, the worse things get later. So yeah, that's interesting that you're running into, hopefully I assume from that, like people starting to ask some deeper questions as well about our relationship.
Well, exactly. And I guess like in a roundabout way to answer your question on how's the campaign going, like it's going great. When someone says something like that, it's like, okay, well, you still have no case. You have no case. So even the most touty oil and gassers, they're already like, this is just a bad idea. It's a bad idea economically. It's a bad idea environmentally. And on a governance level, it's a terrible idea because you have this giant opposition who opposes it. You don't have social licensing to put it there. The people are upset. And when I spoke to Jason Ryu of NR Store, the battery company, I was like, okay, well, if you wanted to replace it with batteries, would you put them there? And he's like, well, no, obviously not. It's not an industrial area and the people don't want it there. You work with the community. So the community, and we're the ratepayers. I think that's what they forget. Like we're the ones who vote for the politicians. So they're there because of us. And then NB Power is our utility. Like we are shareholders, like we pay. So they exist.
Mhm.
and our voices should not be ignored, you know? So like every argument works in our favor. So campaign's going great. Yeah.
I do, yeah, and again, it's like one of those things. I agree with you entirely, and when we see the supply chain disruptions now, like across the planet, that are driving up those costs, that are making oil and gas really the unreliable thing. It's just, yeah, it's great to see people asking these questions and this campaign going so well. Where can people find out more and listen to Ecofactors?
Oh yeah. So Ecofactors, thank you for bringing light to Ecofactors. Did you say you're on 104? So I think we're on like 14, like 14. So it's new, it's a baby. Um, I'm still working on lighting and all that stuff.
Oh, I mean,
But
I clearly have lighting set up, right? Like this is very professional, what I'm doing.
I'm
But
inspired. Um, so it lives on the Atlantic Wildlife YouTube page. So you would go to YouTube and you could probably type in Ecofactors there, or you can type in Ecofactors as well, one word. On Spotify also, I put most episodes up on there. I don't have it up on all the other podcast areas yet, but I will soon.
okay,
Um, and yeah, so the YouTube Atlantic Wildlife. And then the other way that people can kind of find more about the campaign is on the Atlantic Wildlife Protect the Chignecto Isthmus page. So it's atlanticwildlife.ca/PCIC.
okay,
And the first big thing that's clickable is our letter to sign. And that goes out to 10 recipients. That includes like Premier Holt and CEO of NB Power, Lori Clark, and Executive Brad Cody, and a whole bunch of other politicians. It goes to the federal level. It goes to Carney and Julie DeBrusen. And we're trying to get the word across to as many people as possible. And so we hope that as many people will sign that as possible. And then as you scroll down, you can get to signing on to the coalition newsletter, more information about the gas plant. Anybody who's written a letter, it goes on there in a file. Yeah, I change it all the time. Oh, and then all the member groups, their logos are on there too.
perfect. Well, and I'll put links to those places to find things in the description. Thank you so much again, Lisa, for joining me.
Thank you so much for giving light to Ecofactors, and it's been an honor to share this space with you. Fight the good fight.
But before we end today, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions, events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harvard Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe so you get the latest episodes from us.